What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about a World War II battle that was actually fought in Canada. So they definitely skipped this in history class, at least here in the United States, because I had no idea about this. But apparently, the Battle of the St. Lawrence in 1942 was actually fought on Canadian territory within Canada's borders. So today, I really want to learn more about this and learn about what exactly happened. So let's take a look.
During World War II, Canada was tasked with protecting Britain's supply lines in the Atlantic.
Oh, wow.
Without them, Europe would fall in a matter of months. Hitler knew that hitting Canada right at home would sever the incoming resources from America, rendering Britain helpless for Operation Sea Lion,
What?
a complete invasion of England.
What? Oh my God, what? See, it's kind of crazy that, I think a lot of Americans, especially maybe those that are my age or younger, we really don't know a lot about this World War II stuff, and especially about the important role that Canada played. Like, they're already talking about how it was up to Canada to protect the supply lines in the Atlantic Ocean, and to make sure that Europe could be defended, or we'd all be defeated. And it's pretty important stuff that Canada did. And yeah, it's just kind of crazy that we don't recognize this a little more. But anyway, it's kind of nice that at least I'm doing it right now as we speak. So let's keep going.
Subsequently, the Third Reich deployed over 15 U-boats to cripple the Canadian Navy and disrupt the flow of supplies from North America to England. The U-boats torpedoed anything within reach, severely damaging or sinking dozens of Canadian vessels.
What? This is insane. There was literally a battle, war, literal warfare was waged, in Canada's territory. On Canada, on your ships, it sounds like, in the water around Canada. That's crazy. Here in the US, we've had some crazy stuff happen, like Pearl Harbor and 9/11. We've had attacks and stuff, but not I don't know. There's something crazy about having a literal battle on your country's homeland. That's not exactly something we can relate to totally. It's pretty crazy sounding.
Including a civilian ferry that was caught in the fire. The nation had not had its waters penetrated by a foreign enemy since 1812, and the frantic operation to repel Germany's attacks and prevent further destruction of Canada's assets would become known as the legendary Battle of St. Lawrence.
Oh, wow. So just to get this straight, Germany is attacking Canada to disrupt its ability to facilitate the trade and supplies that are going from North America to England, if I understand exactly what's happening. Not to get too bogged down in the details, but it's important.
By that time, Canadians finally realized their government's desperate efforts to keep the supply to Europe open, even at the cost of hundreds of lives, and how close the fight had actually come to them.
Yeah. I had no idea that the fight came this close to Canada. I had no idea about this. What an intro. What an intro.
A navy out of nothing. In 1939, when war erupted in Europe, Canada found itself lacking in maritime power. The Royal Canadian Navy, or RCN, struggled for the past decade amidst the dire financial situation that faced the nation.
I see.
Just a few months before Germany's invasion of Poland, the King's Cabinet had cancelled the production of 4 anti-submarine vessels and 2 motor torpedo boats destined for the RCN.
Really? That's unfortunate. So they actually had ships and Navy vessels and military vessels that they thought about making but didn't. They got canceled. And then World War II happens. That's actually really unfortunate.
By September, Canada found itself at war against some of the mightiest world powers while owning a mere 13 ships to defend both of its far-reaching coastlines.
Yeah, scary.
To make the odds even greater, America seemed to have no intention of joining the war, and Canada was given the crucial task of protecting the supply lines that nourished England through the Atlantic Ocean, just as they had done before during World War I.
Oh, wow. I didn't know about any of this stuff. That Canada had such a critical role in protecting supply lines like across the ocean, and it makes sense given where like Canada is positioned strategically, geographically. I just didn't know. That's a lot of responsibility.
If the supply lines were successfully cut off, Britain would not obtain the minimum weapons and raw materials necessary to make a stand against Hitler.
Oh my God.
Crippling Britain in such a way would surely mean the prompt fall of Europe before the expanding Third Reich.
No big deal. No pressure, Canada. No pressure. You just gotta single-handedly make sure to stop the fall of Europe. So, don't screw it up. No pressure.
Canada's all-important purpose was set. To achieve it, the nation began an aggressive and unprecedented industrial production plan.
Oh.
The program would have to turn its 13-ship navy into a fleet flaunting hundreds of vessels in less than 2 years to provide the nautical convoys necessary to reach its goals.
Oh my God.
The clock was ticking, and the pressure was on, especially after the fall of France in 1940, which cleared Germany's pass into the Atlantic Ocean.
Wow. History is so fascinating. And this, I don't know. I've started to think about like how a lot of this stuff, it didn't even happen that long ago. I think for those of us like my age or, like stuff that happened before I was born, like when I was a kid, I really didn't pay this a lot of credit or attention. And now, as I get older and older, I start to really understand the significance and the importance of like understanding that this was really, really, really important stuff. And it wasn't all that long ago that this all happened. I think for a lot of kids, this sounds like ancient medieval history or something, like the Stone Ages or something that happened like 1,000 years ago. And it's like, no, this was not that long ago.
Unhindered, Hitler deployed all the might of the Kriegsmarine into the North Sea. The sooner he could strangle Britain's lifeline, the sooner Europe would fall.
Jeez.
In response, Canada deployed all the ships it could, which would come out of the shipyard and into the battlefield. Thanks to its diligent efforts, Canada's initially insufficient number of vessels was a thing of the past. However, a fleet of unmanned ships did not make a world-class navy.
How the heck did Canada pull that off? You had like 13 ships, and then in a year or two, you had like a whole fleet. Like, that's pretty, it just shows Canada's like dedication, really. And all the resources you must have devoted to making this happen. And the fate of the world was kind of at stake. So that's like pretty motivating. But yeah, Canada certainly did its part. Like, what more can you ask? So you got the ships, and now you need like the personnel to man it.
At the start of World War II, Canada only counted 129 officers and 1,456 men amid its ranks. Then, as France fell, Canada rushed a 2-week training program to hurriedly bolster its navy's numbers.
Wow.
It would come as no surprise, then, that the results were less than ideal.
Sure.
As the old sailing proverb goes, quote, "While it takes 2 years to build a ship, it takes 5 years to train a sailor."
Sure. Like, and it's, I don't know. It's hard to even fathom, like, the mindset one has to have when being told, like, oh yeah, you're becoming a soldier now. You're going to participate in World War II. Go get them. Like, the bravery, I have such a respect for the people who had to participate in all this, for the freedom that we enjoy today.
Many soon-to-be mariners had never seen the sea, as they were farmers, factory workers, and businessmen. Nathan M. Greenfield even relates in his book, The Battle of St. Lawrence, the Second World War in Canada, that, quote, The crew was so green that they were seasick within hours of leaving the jetty in Quebec City.
Oh my God.
And
Wow.
seasickness was not the only obstacle that awaited these brave servicemen. The conditions aboard Canada's hurriedly produced anti-submarine corvettes were less than optimal. Ventilation.
So these are like regular, ordinary Canadians from regular jobs who were kind of like drafted or something to do all this and, step up when the world needed them. Like, I don't know. I just can't emphasize enough how much I think Americans really do not understand the contributions that Canada has made, like in these battles in the World War II and stuff. Yeah.
Ventilation shafts would allow seawater to pass into the crew's mess hall, which meant that the new sea soldiers had to live and work constantly drenched while evading the floating leftovers of food and personal belongings.
What?
In contrast, the men serving the Kriegsmarine's U-boat task force had years of experience and an impeccable discipline, plus all the advantages that state-of-the-art submarines bring. As the Germans took control of the Atlantic,
Okay.
the RCN prepared for an uphill battle.
Wow. So you got the ragtag group of Canadians who became extraordinary in the time of need, manning these new ships who are fresh out of the factory, all to protect these supply lines. And it sounds like during a lot of this time, the United States wasn't even helping in any way. So it was really up to Canada, like as far as North America was concerned. Huge responsibility.
U-boats at their doorstep. Canada heroically embraced its mission from 1940 until the end of the war. The RCN protected the ships carrying supplies to England to the best of their abilities.
Wow.
And Britain was able to prevail through the Blitz. However, the fact that the RCN was still a medium-sized and inexperienced force meant they did it while paying a hefty price, leaving their shores unprotected.
Oh, wow. Oh, God.
Karl Dönitz, commander of the Kriegsmarine, took advantage of this weakness and brought the war directly into Canada's waters in an attempt to crush the RCN's deployment right from its roots.
What? See, this is the part where it's like, I know Canada was a part of World War II. I don't really know much of the details, but the idea that Canada was such a thorn in Germany's side and playing such an important role for us that they launched a dedicated attack, like on Canada's coast or waters, to disrupt the protection Canada was offering. Like, that goes to show you how important it was that it was getting its own dedicated, operations to disrupt what Canada was doing. Like, Canada was being that annoying or that effective at what it was doing.
On May 12, 1942, the U-553 approached the Gulf of the St. Lawrence River, seeking calmer waters to conduct repairs. The commander immediately realized how unprotected the river's mouth really was. Seizing the opportunity, the U-boat fired several torpedoes at the British freighter Nicoya, which stood just a couple of miles off Anticosti Island.
What?
The submarine then pursued and fired upon the Dutch freighter Ledo.
Whoa. Hold on. Where are we? Dude, I didn't expect so much to start happening so quickly. Quebec? St. Lawrence River? Well, here's a map. There's the USA, Quebec. Okay. All right. Because I have to, it has to be clear at least, where the heck this is happening.
The St. Lawrence River, seeking calmer waters to conduct repairs.
Okay. And who was...
U-553 approached the Gulf of the St. Lawrence.
Okay. Got it.
Protected the river's mouth really was. Seizing the opportunity, the U-boat fired several torpedoes at the British freighter Nicoya, which stood just a couple of miles off Anticosti Island. The submarine then pursued and fired upon the Dutch freighter Ledo, obliterating it in a fiery explosion and continuing the onslaught.
Oh my God.
After sinking both ships, the U-boat returned to the Atlantic. It was a fruitful night for the Nazis, as they had brought the war to less than 400 miles from Quebec City.
Holy cow. That's an understatement. Just a couple 100 miles away from a major Canadian city. Boats getting blown to smithereens. Wow. I had no idea that this happened. And how sneaky. But it sounds like it was a Dutch ship or a British ship that was actually attacked. Not a Canadian vessel. I'm not trying to say one is worth more or less than the other, but Canada itself, so far, like, I'm sure that during the course of the protecting of the supply lines, Canada lost ships and men. But during this U boat attack, which is crazy, and just off Canada's shore, had a lot of fatalities, but not Canadian.
This action sent Canada's government into a frenzy. They wondered how the Nazis could destroy 2 Allied ships inside their territory, and how they could be so close to Quebec without raising any alarms.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Canada suddenly realized how vulnerable they were to a Nazi invasion from the Atlantic. With their navy busy escorting shipments to Great Britain, they had left only 4 ships to defend the mouth of the St. Lawrence.
Oh my God. And who knows why that was. Like, maybe it does feel like here in the United States that we are so far away from everything. I think that's kind of a reason a lot of Americans don't care about a lot of stuff that happens in the world and other countries. We feel so far away, and maybe even we feel safe. But this just goes to show you, as safe as you feel, suddenly there's a U-boat right there in your face.
This was a massive vulnerability, and now the Nazis knew about it. The Allied strategists then met for an emergency summit. However, as terrifying as the events had been, they concluded that the St. Lawrence was a secondary target for Germany. Rerouting their already thinly spread resources to that location would hurt their overall war efforts.
Sure.
So Canada only received a few corvettes to reinforce the river.
That is terrifying. That's terrifying. Canada is realizing how vulnerable it is, but there just isn't the resources to protect this area of Canada. So you just kind of have to, like, hope nothing else happens, which is pretty terrifying. And selfless, if you think about it from Canada's point of view. Canada, could divert its ships away from protecting supply lines for England and to protecting Canada's borders and this weak point. But you didn't, which is pretty, selfless, heroic, pretty amazing.
The St. Lawrence remained vulnerable, and the Nazis continued to press on. On July 20th, the U-132 sank 3 freighters near the Gaspé coast and severely damaged a 4th one. The U-boat managed to escape, even after being pursued by the corvette HMCS Drummondville.
What?
Later research would show that U-boats had a considerable advantage when attacking in that area, as the merging of fresh and salt water in the river's Gulf created a thermal anomaly that would mess with the Allied sonars, making it...
No freaking way. This is insane. It's crazy. History's crazy. So the heat signature of that area of the water was messed up because of the composition of the water there, making it so these German U-boats could just wreak havoc on this specific part of Canada.
Much harder to pinpoint the precise location of the submarines. More attacks followed. In September, the U-1517 infiltrated the St. Lawrence Bay, sank 9 ships, and damaged another while evading the RCN's effort to stop it.
This is terrifying. Literally Nazi submarines bombing Canada. Never knew about this.
A month later, the ferry SS Caribou was torpedoed by the U-69 in Cabot Strait, just a few miles from St. Lawrence's Gulf. Despite a valiant rescue operation, 131 passengers perished. And as before, the U-boat escaped unscathed, much to the frustration of the pursuing minesweeper HMCS Grand Mare.
Yeah. To my knowledge, the United States never dealt with anything like this. A prolonged attack on your homeland. This is terrifying. Random boats getting torpedoed and bombed, hundreds of people dying, Canadians dying. Yeah, I really didn't realize the extent and really the horror of this.
The German U-boats continued to humiliate the RCN efforts during the following months, sinking several other ships and even landing quite a few spies in mainland Canada.
Oh my.
Still, most of the agents were promptly captured, but a few managed to infiltrate Quebec and other large cities, extracting valuable information on Canada's convoy routes and strategies.
Wow. This is insane.
A difficult decision.
Yeah, what do you do?
On a large scale, the U-boat attacks were of minor significance to the overall war efforts. Thanks to Canada's escort operations, Britain was able to prevail, and Germany was losing time, resources, and men. Besides,
Again, incredibly selfless for Canada to prioritize its mission for the Allies, protecting the trade boats and over, this with the horror happening to Canada and the attacks. Like, that takes so much discipline and bravery to do that.
with the entrance of the US into the war, the scenario was looking much bleaker for the Third Reich.
Thank goodness.
Nevertheless, from a local viewpoint, the Battle of St. Lawrence was a political disaster. Canada's government tried to keep the attacks from the press. Instead of helping, this action fueled the rage of the civilians who knew what was happening, and many of the coastal towns where the people could see the sinking ships with their own eyes panicked.
Oh, yes, of course.
Distrust for Canada's leaders continued to grow. As their inability to protect the St. Lawrence became more evident, they decided to completely close the bay to transatlantic traffic on September 9th, 1942.
That makes sense.
Shipments to England were then rerouted through the ports of Halifax and New York. At the time,
It's just too much of a vulnerability. So the battle was really like a prolonged period of time where German submarines were bombing ships in the St. Lawrence, and Canada was doing its best to survive the onslaught while also diverting most of its defensive resources to defending Allied trade ships rather than this area of Canada. And then there's some controversial like cover-up going on or something where sure, this looks bad, but you don't cover up like the sacrifices of your people and stuff. That seems kind of messed up.
many considered the closing of the bay as the worst decision ever implemented by the government of William Lyon Mackenzie King, showing an admission of defeat before the might of the Kriegsmarine.
Oh,
However, in hindsight, many historians consider it a brilliant tactical choice by Canada, one that halted the U-boat attacks in the area while supporting the global Allied war effort.
yeah, what are you supposed to do?
In the end, a slow and steady strategy won the race. After the closing of the St. Lawrence and the continuing growth of Canada's navy, the Nazi U-boats were forcibly recalled into the Atlantic to reinforce their comrades, as their numbers were quickly dwindling.
You survived.
Enduring the tragic Nazi attacks in the Gulf of the St. Lawrence for more than 2 years had been tough, but it
2 years? Canada withstood this like renegade submarine bombings, drive-by bombings for 2 years?
also bought precious time for England, the US, and other allies to prepare for the eventual liberation of Europe.
It really is quite like what a selfless act. No wonder you closed off the St. Lawrence Bay or what it's amazing you didn't do it sooner.
By 1944, Canada had one of the most potent and experienced naval forces in the world, and the Nazis were no match for them.
Oh wow. Wow.
Thank you for watching our video.
Wow. That's crazy. I had no idea. I would venture to say most Americans have no idea what Canada sacrificed, like for our safety, our freedom, for the Allies, the Allied victory, protecting protecting people from other nations who needed Canada's help. That is an amazing story, inspiring, brave, so much respect. Yeah. So, like I said, not something we are taught about here in the U.S., but such an amazing story certainly deserves its moment, and I'm so glad I took some time to learn about this. So, anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like or leave a comment with your thoughts on the Battle of St. Lawrence and Canada's amazing, you could say, sacrifices for what it did during World War II to help with the victory, and which I think is really understated. Like at least here, like you deserve more recognition for this, truly. So, and if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada and seeing Canadian things I've never seen before, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.